I think it's a very important theme, and I think it is symbolic of the situation really in Africa. I mean, for far too long, I mean, there's been this talk about Africa's potential, about the need to get things fixed, about the need to get things done, and this has been going on for decades. And so I'm really happy that the World Economic Summit on Africa for this year is actually focused on really getting things to happen, you know, in real terms. And I really think that it is something that should be reinforced. It is something that I hope that the participants and heads of governments and top CEOs that are here, they will all see the important need for everyone to log onto this theme, and then to really begin to articulate policies and then implementation programs that will give fillip to what we know is the way for Africa to go in the 21st century.
If we underscore the concept of action, what would that mean? Because some would argue what Africa needs at this stage is to really move more concertedly into an industrialization process. We really need to focus on manufacturing economies across the spectrum of agriculture to mining economies, for instance.
I mean, I agree with you, but again, in order for that to happen, you also need very stable governments. You need democracy. You need to guarantee people's rights. You know, you need for people to participate in governance. So the issue might come up, which one comes first? And if you ask me, without stability across the region, across the entire continent, then whatever policies, whether it's industrialization policy, whatever else you try to do, will almost be compromised from the beginning. So I agree with you that yes, we need to industrialize. That's the only way to go, because for far too long, again, most economies in Africa have been sort of have been focused on commodities, or have been focused on just one product or the other. Okay, so there's a very, very strong need for diversification. But even before that happens, there must be stability. If you take what has happened in Nigeria recently with the great elections we've just had, that's one giant step forward, because you not only have you given people a sense of belonging that yes, we have the capacity to choose our leaders, but you're also telling the international community that we're ready for business. And so we expect, for instance, that in the coming months and years, that more foreign investors will feel more comfortable to come in, knowing that yes, we have a democratically elected president, there's freedom of speech, there's freedom of, to own property, all those things are in place.
Let's talk about the Nigerian example that you've just raised, because also in leading the NESG, you've created over the last 2 years a forum where the president can engage civil society and also the business community about the best practice and the best way forward to really change the face of that economy. Nigeria is obviously going to do well in terms of growth statistics because of a higher oil price. But Nigeria is not doing well in terms of broader economic development because it is an economy reliant solely and heavily on oil.
I mean, absolutely, it is a major source of concern, and I believe that the administration of President Goodluck Jonathan also realizes this, and that is why that's why we hope that in the coming months and years, and again, I can confirm that based on our interaction with the Minister of Finance, Segun Aganga, that government is deeply committed to diversifying this economy, to really create more value in the agricultural chain, to make sure that we create more large-scale farms that are not just there to produce primary products, but that these products that are produced, or this produce from the farms, are able that we can add more value to them. Today, agriculture is responsible for about 42% of our national GDP. It's extremely important, and yet this is just on the basis of subsistence agriculture. So you can imagine what would happen, for instance, if we paid more attention to the other aspects of the value chain of agriculture. Imagine what will happen, for instance, to employment if many more people had opportunity to participate in that sector because of this, the added value that will be created. Then look at, for instance, the mining sector, okay? We focus essentially on oil and gas all this while, but Nigeria has a lot of minerals, about 33 of them, high-value minerals that have been identified over the years. Right. Now, a structured regulatory environment will change all of that. We'll see major players coming in there and then create more value in the economy. Now, look at the issue of our infrastructure, for instance, that if the right spending is budgeted and then implemented in a very targeted way, you can imagine the kind of jobs it's going to create. So the government realizes the need to actually diversify the economy, okay, away from oil. And as a matter of fact, in more recent years, growth in the non-oil sector of the economy has been quite remarkable, it's been quite significant. and it is something we're extremely happy about.
Obviously, in terms of the right regulatory environment, we are seeing the energy sector reforms and the privatization of some public assets within the transmission and distribution aspects of the energy sector. What's happening in other areas, for instance, that are critical? In telecommunications, for instance, are we seeing fundamental reforms that are leading to more investments? Because apparently there is where Nigeria could have a competitive advantage, but hampered and hamstrung by a lack of clarity when it comes to regulation.
No, well, I think the reference you made to the telecom sector is, I'm sorry, a bit misplaced, because I think we have one of the most robust telecoms regulatory environments in the world today.
You have no listed telecom stocks except for one.
Well, thanks. I'm glad you're raising it. MTN is South African, and we hope that perhaps they will see the need to actually come to the market. But I know that this conversation has been taking place more recently in certain quarters, and we hope that in the coming months and years that MTN will see the need to actually come to the market in Nigeria. But in terms of the regulatory environment, I think as an ex-minister for information and communication, I'm in a position to say clearly that we have one of the most robust regulatory frameworks systems for telecoms in Africa, if not around the world. But again, with what is happening, say, in the power sector, for instance, the recent reconstitution of the National Electricity Regulatory Commission, that's one giant step forward to actually push through the reforms in the electricity sector, and they've started work. We know, for instance, that recently they called for expression of interest for the concession or privatization of distribution companies of Nigeria. And we also know that in another 3 weeks or so, there's going to be another call for expression of interest for the privatization of the generation companies of Nigeria under the reform initiatives in that sector. So we believe that the government is moving in the right direction. But of course, we remain concerned about the reference you made to the rather robust GDP growth, but which have not really translated to welfare and the well-being of the people. And part of it is that we know the sources of this growth, and we do know that perhaps one way to deal with these issues is to diversify the economy in such a way that, say, power becomes available, more people participate in the agricultural value chain, open up the mining sector, set up a regulatory framework for the mining sector, and then, of course, once this happens, you're going to see more investments in critical sectors of the economy, which will translate to employment. Okay, and then overall really see expansion of the Nigerian economy.